This is Alexa Linton, and you're listening to the Whole Horse Podcast. I'm coming to you from the Cowichan Valley on beautiful Vancouver Island in Canada, and I'm excited to be bringing amazing instructors from around the world to share their knowledge about all the ways that we can keep ourselves and our horses well and happy, and about some of the cutting edge techniques, training, and different aspects that are coming into the horse industry and changing it from within. I'm so excited you're here, and I'm excited about the times that we live in and the shifts that are happening in the horse industry before our eyes. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Whole Horse Podcast. It's Alexa Linton here, and I'm here today with one of my favorite guests. I'm back with Josh Nichol. Hi, Josh. Welcome back.
Hello, hello. Good to be here.
Josh is, for the first time I've ever seen him without a cowboy hat, because it is minus 30. What did you say? Minus 30, minus a balmy minus 25 today, I think you said, and then going down to minus 30 tonight.
It started at 39 this morning and it's minus 26 right now. So yeah, it's funny how perspective makes this seem a little bit warmer.
You're like, it is
very cold.
Lovely out now. That is in Celsius, everyone, just so you know. She's made this a regular thing. My kitten has jumped on my shoulder again for the third podcast in a row. All right, there we go. So today, Josh and I wanted to hop on here. I have had some questions regarding a topic that's come up a number of times for me over the years, which is around herd integration, how to integrate a herd, how to make sure everybody stays safe, how to, do it in a good way that's going to, help everybody be happy and healthy, essentially. So, Josh, I know that most people probably listen to podcasts before with you, but maybe just a little bit of your background, and then we can hop into this topic that is, an important one.
Yeah. Yes. Well, thank you for having me. Excited about this topic. It's definitely a fun one because I think there's lots of unique ideas, some very simple and some kind of unique. So I really enjoy the topic. I prioritize relational horsemanship. I love to be able to do things in such a way that allow horses to be heard, be understood, doing my best to constantly learn more about what it is that they need. And that being what relational horsemanship focuses on. It's the question is, when you see a struggle, the question is, what need is unmet? What's going on for the horse that we could fill in on to bring peace to them? When often their behavioral actions are observed as, even when we say behavioral, we think that about negative, that they're demonstrating some kind of disrespect or disobedience, which then begins a plethora of muddy interpretation that creates justifiable action or seemingly justifiable action. So relational horsemanship is just trying to understand them. I want to get to know them. And I've spent many years stumbling through that, in some ways trying approaches that maybe didn't kind of meet that, and then just trying to work my way around understanding it better and better. And as I listen more to the horses, they continue to help me know them better. And that's kind of the journey. So that leading to this great challenge that we have, which is very unnatural to horses, which is us just kind of integrating horses, is a very good topic. So you want me to kind of get started?
Yeah, I mean, this topic has come up for me, over the years, a number of times I've wanted to have this conversation. And then more recently, we experienced a tragedy at our barn, exclusively related to this conversation. And it just brought it to the forefront once again for me, how important it is. And out here in BC, so British Columbia, for anybody listening, especially in, my area, which you teach in, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
So like, Victoria and Lower Mainland, we don't often have a ton of space for our horses. And either, there's kind of two ways of being, or a few ways of being, I guess. One is that horses are never integrated, and it's like everybody just lives on their own in their own individual space, and that's that. And sometimes with an electric fence as the cherry on top, to keep them apart. And then sometimes there is some integration, maybe a horse or one other horse. And then there's the rare occasion out here where it's like, there's lots of horses living together, and they're doing so in a good way. And then there's all sorts of, stuff in between, I guess. And so what I've seen over my years is that horses do the best when they can live with others in community, oftentimes, not exclusively, but oftentimes. But that there is so often either a lack of confidence, or sort of what we might term like the bubble wrap effect of like, oh my gosh, I've spent this much money on this horse, I can't have them injured. Or conversely, horses that have never had the social engagement muscle worked to the point where they're so insecure that putting them in with it, other horses is dangerous. So this is kind of what's fueling my fire right now as far as this conversation. And I really am, not coming from a trainer type sort of space, but like there's just this deep curiosity, and I feel this need for many of us to understand, okay, what does it look like for horses to more peacefully live together, to have more of those needs met, to be more happy and comfortable, so that's kind of where I'm coming to with this conversation. So I'd love to hear sort of what your starting points are for some of that.
It's so great, because truly, right, we care so much about these animals, and we don't have them for the purpose. Majority of people don't have horses now for the purpose of work and being taking a cart to town, and these are a family. They are we care so much about them. So then these interactions could bring great risk if done maybe in a way that's not super helpful for the horses. So I'll just kind of little backstory, little kind of build around this first before we kind of dive into it. But naturally, horses are given a lot of opportunity to find the balance in their herds. If you look at some of the natural herd dynamics and some of the more Western natural wild elements, we call them wild horses, horses in a natural environment, they're smaller bands. And there's this kind of balance. You don't generally see like massive mega herds. So if horses don't enjoy each other or have a hard time connecting with each other, they can move on. They can find a group that might work with them. They can start a new group. They do love the social structure, but they're not necessarily all going to fit. They're not all going to come together. And if they are, it's going to only be with assistance. And that's going to be through the transformative effect of our ability to engage in their life and help them think in a new way. So then that's where this challenge comes in, because now what we do is we take these horses and we just put them together. And now they don't have enough room spatially to find a natural distance where they could begin the engagement process of getting to know each other, but still having the ability to disengage and connect and engage and connect, because they can't get out of each other's space. That's the reason we think that stallions will kill each other, if they are put in the same pens, because generally it's because they can't clear space. They can't clear each other to find their own center. So we look at most of our pens and they're very small. So this is part of the struggle. All right. So then this starts to bring me to where I've developed these ideas that I have at this point. So in my early 20s, I began training for the public, and I started bringing horses in. And we have quite a few pens, and we're able to split horses up. But generally what I like to do is I like my training horses. I want them to be in community, as you said. I don't want them to be separated. So it became a mindfulness for me to be able to engage them. And in the beginning, we would just kind of put them together. And isn't that the common idea? And then you find, oh, that doesn't kind of work right away. So then you split them up and you put them with a fence between, because that lets you allow them to kind of get to know each other. But then there's the risk of fences and, getting caught up in fences and these injuries that come with that. And it's like, well, maybe that's better than them hurting each other. Yeah. So there's these trade-offs. So what I developed over the years was a process that I still really feel very strongly about, that I found huge value. And so what I do is, anytime you would like horses to be together, what I generally will do is I'm going to work them individually. So I'll put them in their own pen. And what we have is we have separate pens that don't actually border by a fence. They border with a gap. So there would be a pen, and then there's another pen 6 feet from that where they can see each other, they can be around each other, but they're not necessarily put in a situation where they can't clear each other. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then what I do is I begin the process of working each horse, because one of the biggest things that comes is that we engage horses together that have generally unmet needs. So their basic sense of confidence is not there. And that's a little bit like kind of balling up a bunch of kids in school and just kind of throwing them into the playground and just expecting everything to go well, because you're just dealing with so many different energies and trauma states and relational strengths and weaknesses. And without leadership, it can be a real mess. So then my process is to begin analyzing each one. I work each horse until I feel like I can, in the round pen or in a bigger space, wherever it works for them, to get a general sense of peace with me. That I would observe each horse release to a sense of confidence with me. So they're looking to me for a sense of confidence. I want to get to a place where I recognize that they're not calling for other horses. They're not worried in my presence, but that when I show up, they're pretty happy about that. And then when I go to work them, I can, move them through the gates and I can go and do various things. So I'll generally try to work them for a week or two where it's just me and them, and I do that with all the horses. Then what I'll do is I will move to the next step, which is taking 2 horses into the round pen together. Mm. But what I'll do is I'll start with 1 horse on the halter, and then I will work the other horse. And what happens almost consistently is, as soon as you turn the 1 horse loose, they want to try to visit. Now, this is where it's very important that you have clear connection with each of them, so that you already have a level of connectivity, so you're not getting in the middle of a problem by putting these horses in a pen together and then you getting hurt. So what I do is I make sure at this stage that energetically and spatially, I have the ability to present my space between them and they both focus on me, so that there is no sense that when I am in that space that they're talking to each other in their own mind. Primarily, there needs to be a clarity that when my energy is present, the interaction is happening inside of my energy and my space. Now, I'm going to be strong with my space, but very calm. The boundaries are going to be very clear, that I would like you to wait and I would like you to wait, but it's done in calmness, not aggressiveness. Until I can have the 1 horse stand and wait, and I see a level of relaxation in both of them. Then I will ask the other horse to move. And I will have this horse on the lead rope with me, and I'll just work towards being able to move them and turn them and gently walk, trot, and canter until everything looks the same as it did before. It's very important to create a template. I love templates. The scientist in me loves comparative, where you can have kind of a control. And then when you change it, you can compare against, right? That's a scientific kind of necessity. So then I switch the horses. And I'll put a halter on the one, and I'll take the halter off the other. And almost immediately, the horse that was on the halter is engaged and wants to kind of get curious. And this curiosity is understandable, but initially is not necessarily acceptable, because they need, again, to change that dynamic and then become okay with me being able to step in, and then there being an element of real clarity. And then day 1 will end that way. Day 1 ends that way. Okay. A lot of times people are too excited to try to incorporate the dynamic too quickly. Okay. And then what happens is through this process, I want to say this as kind of a caution. If you do this too quickly, because you're involved, you could get hurt if you are not taking the steps thoroughly carefully and cautiously. So then I would put them away and I would let them soak on that.
Yep.
And I will do this until I can bring them both in and I can do that work. And they don't even care. They don't even care.
Yep.
My energy is the lead. They're happy to allow me to be present. And then what I'll do is I'll take, and generally I would say, I'll put them away and I'll come back the next day. Generally by the next day, it's not even a deal. So then I'm moving on to the next step. So then for those 2 horses, I'm going to leave that alone. Now I'll leave them. And then what I'll do is I'll bring in 2 more, again, with the clarity of each one. And I'll do that same step. And then I'll do it with 2 different horses. So if I had a group of 4, I'd work 2, then I would work these 2 together and these 2 together, and you see how it would go around until they all get the concept. And it doesn't matter the difference in the horses, they're cool with it. Okay, and then what I start to do is I will still keep the one on the halter, but then once I feel a beautiful clarity, I will start to step back in such a way where I'm opening the space for them to be closer to each other, but not yet sniffing noses. So I'll work them. I'll work the one with the other one on the halter. And then when we're taking a break, I will let them be closer to each other. But it's again done in my energy. And the key is my ability to stay energetically connected to the space. So they are resting inside of my way. Mm-hmm. So recognizing that the clarity with which I fill the space sets a tone. And this is 100% normal to horses, because in a herd dynamic, you will see some horses that are leading or, are maybe sometimes the best of the worst, but have risen to the top or whatever, and are leading, might not have the best natural qualities, but they will lead with a certain energy, and that will permeate the herd. And sometimes that creates a lot of dissension in the herd, and other times it creates great peace. The privilege that gives us is it allows us to decide what kind of energy we want our herds to feel. You can start working on this to set that kind of tone. And if a horse believes they want to kind of engage in a certain way, if you've done enough work, I can step in and I can disengage that thought, and I can look for them to re-engage my energy until the peace is back. Once I've done that, then I will take the halter off. But now what I'll start doing, and I love this, this is one of my favorite, this is where Liberty work really started kind of taking off for me, to work horses in groups, was to now have one horse stay with me and hook on, and then I would start moving the other horse. And in time, I would start to open up access for them to be able to communicate and touch noses, but I would be very connected. I'll give them some space, but I am also deciding. So if there gets to where they're getting a little bit big, I'll just step in and energetically, maybe I'll use my flag or a stick so that I have a little bit of distance so that I'm staying safe. But on the same hand, by that time, I've done enough work that if I just step in, sometimes I'll just kind of make a noise or say something, and they let the thought go. Until the point where they can then stand and rest together, now both offline, and then I start working them in movement together. The key for me is that they need to move like a flock. They need to move like birds. You need to feel that their energies join together. If a herd is asked to be together and you do not yet see flow, that they're not able to gently move together, what's going to happen is they'll kind of talk a little bit, and one horse is going to be at the back, and then one horse might come to the front, and then I'll stop them and draw them in, and then I'll stop and I'll settle the energy again, and then I'll turn and I'll go the other way, and I'll move them a little bit until I see that they're moving in. If you looked over them, that you feel the flow is the same.
Got it.
That they're moving in the same rhythm. Most horses are never given this chance before they're kicked into the herd. So then there's never a sense of this type of clarity. Then I'll bring another horse in on the halter until I'm now working 2 horses. Okay. I have 2 loose and I have 1 on the halter.
Yep.
And slowly, guess what happens? Pretty soon, the same process happens, and then you're letting them define. But now they're getting horses love being in community with each other, and they love even more being in community with us as well. Mm-hmm. That creates this really unique synergistic energy of the beauty that the human brings in association with what the herd does. And there's great magic that happens there. So then when you interact that way at the onset of the development of the herd, man, it starts to establish such a cool energy. Mm-hmm. So then slowly, now what I do, I want to get to a place where I have this horse on the halter. And if I can do the work well, and this is always my challenge, and I'm giving everyone my highest form of learning. This is gonna, and some people are gonna say, "Oh, I can do that." If you take your time and you break it down into small chunks, it's digestible. Okay, if you're just gonna take everything and you think I'm saying you have to do everything that I'm doing, it might seem a little overwhelming. But the next step that I take is I want to have that horse on the halter, and then I'm working the two, and then I want to start having fun with my intentions, which is that I can start feeling both horses. And then I'll really get focused on one horse and ask them to come in. And I might apply a little pressure to draw their attention and get them. And then I draw them in and I keep the other horse moving. And I want to now get to a place where I can still send this horse, and I can send right through that other horse, and that horse stands and waits. So when I can get to a place where I can send one horse with the other horse waiting, and then send them both together with this horse present on the halter, I then go to 3. And then I'll work all 3 until I can play and have fun. So I'll work them as a herd. I want to see them flow like birds. I want to see the energy move. I want to let them have time that they get to rest together. Okay. And this is another piece that will happen once you have 3 horses, is that they'll start trying to have herd conversations. Okay. And then that's when I step in again. And I want them to understand that herd conversations are good, but they need to understand with my involvement that there's a way to do it respectfully. There's a way to do it so we don't hurt each other. So then if I feel they're sniffing noses and they're kind of posturing, but it's being done in a way where everybody's being safe and careful, then I let it be. But I will step in at certain spots, and I want to know that if I step in, they're willing to let it go. Again, this all should be established in the individual time with each horse, so that you know without a shadow of a doubt that they're committed to what you're asking. And that's really where I find that people don't necessarily have that level of clarity before they start interacting. So then now we have 3 horses that are working well. And I want to know I could stop one here, and one over here. So they're willing to give up each other's space, or that I could put them together. The conclusive goal is that they get to the most relief when they stand calmly together. So if one starts to get aggressive and starts to want to push, then all I'll do is I'll just step in with not aggression, but I'm going to step in and I'm going to move them. And then I'm just going to move their feet a little bit. And then when they start to let the energy go, I let them come back together. So they start seeing, they actually get this beautiful sense of release when they're calm and together. And this starts to play in the mind that being together has this really nice space. And again, I think the concepts of making the wrong thing difficult and the right thing easy can be taken way too far out of context, to where we're kind of making the wrong thing so difficult and the right thing not nearly easy enough. And with horses, we know what a little fly can do. So the wrong thing, or the thing you are looking to discourage, doesn't have to be that much pressure. It just, so what I see it as is, it's no problem. It's just another opportunity for us to move a little bit more. So then I step in and I ask them to move, and we go on. And then pretty soon they start to associate having to move a little bit with having this type of energy in the herd, because it's incohesive with the frequency that we're trying to define. And then I put them away. And then slowly the fun is to get to a place where what I would do is I would generally have anywhere between 7 to 10 horses. And so I would work 7 to 10 in the round pen. That's what my goal would be. Wow. To the point where I could work them all together. I could work them, they would work at liberty. And then I could stop a couple. And once I felt like the herd was kind of happy to see each other and they would have fun and play, like there was a sense of playfulness in the herd, then we would start moving into a bigger pen. So then what we have is I don't know, the pen is probably 100 by 150. And I would take them into that pen, and I would initially take a couple. But once I felt like the herd had kind of had the idea, generally it wasn't very challenging. And I would take them in, and then I would stay present with them. It was very important initially, because that's always the question. It's like, wow, it's one thing if you're there, Josh, it's a whole other thing if you're not. And I get that. There is that natural struggle, and there's only so much we can do. But boy, we can stack the deck. And I would get to a place where I could bring them into that pen, and I could turn them loose. And I would generally have some help, because it's sometimes hard to take 10 horses in on a halter. That's, it's doable, but not when they don't know each other. So we would take the horses over, and then we would begin the process of turning them loose, and one horse at a time. And then I would just engage them a little bit until I could feel them feel me. So if a horse walked in there and they felt kind of off, or like they wanted to interact too much, I would just engage, and I would talk to them specifically, and I would wait until I felt them soften. The biggest key is that no matter if you take this whole process, that in the interaction of having the two horses together, that you can sense them soften individually to your energy, because as they soften to your energy, they begin taking on your frequency. And that to me is the key. That doesn't generally happen. We're just like, oh, don't break anything. And we're quite submissive in our energy, and they come in their whatever, and they interact with this flamboyant, uncertainty or anxiety or whatever. And then that's where the struggle comes. So stepping into the new space, I want them to recognize that nothing's changed. So then I let one go, and I want to see that they would go off and become calm. And then I let another one go, and I want to let them go. And sometimes they would go to each other, and I would step in and I would talk to them until that changed. And then pretty soon, two horses are eating. Generally, they would start eating together. They would eat, eat grass beside each other, because they prefer that. And then I would gently let another one go, and I would stay very involved. And if a person is a little unsure, then what you would do is you would have someone else letting the horses go, and you would be stepping in. So all you had to do is focus on being able to moderate the interactions. So that's kind of step one. And I would stay in the pen with them. For that first time. Oftentimes, I've got to a place by that point, they're pretty much good. And the herd would be good. And you would get, I would say that, from a perspective of percentage, I don't know what it would drop, because you never know what would have happened. But, the amount of injury, we just didn't have it. We just didn't have, I can't remember having herd injuries. It's been a while now, but it's not something that I can remember. I was thinking about it when we were talking about You would sometimes have, they would slip on the ice or something, and maybe that was a herd dynamic thing. But anyways, from there, I would spread hay. So that's the next thing, is hay and oats, because if you're going to be bucketing, putting a bucket of mixture of supplement or whatever, that becomes another, great form of communication. So if you're dealing with a bigger herd, it's important to break that down again, so you have smaller groups, so that it's manageable for your level of confidence with what you're doing. This herd interaction, it might be something you bring back to the round pen, and you work with two horses at the same time. Yeah. And what I generally would do is I would interact. I would get them one horse at a time, that I would carry the bucket, and I would work them until I felt them let go to the concepts of responding to my frequency about the bucket. And then I would put it down, and then I would just open my space, and I would have them eat with me, kind of close, but not in their space about it. And I would do that with each one. And that now is beginning the training. They're in training now. You see, these horses are in the herd together, but now this is training. Because I want them to be able to, I need to observe in the training that the horses are willing to relinquish something that matters to them to my frequency, because that really becomes a training thing. If a lot of times where people run into trouble, it's like, I want to go home. Well, I don't want to go home. Well, I don't care that you want that. We're going this way. And the horse says the same, and it now turns into an argument. So being able to proactively calculate those conversations becomes a really important training perspective for me, because I want to know that I can step in and see that they would be willing to relinquish a thought for me, to the point that then you do 2, and then you can do 3. But I think these steps where because food's a big deal. Food is a massive primal space. So initially the primal space, or the reptilian brain, ramps up based on the initial interactions, and they stop thinking, and they run, and they chase, and they do all the things they do, which is where generally they get hurt. Secondly, it's the food. So once oats are easier. I don't generally love spreading hay in my round pen, like putting hay out in my round pen, because I just love that to be a clean space where we can just speak on the need. without having a secondary draw.
Mm-hmm.
So I will use a bucket of oats in the round pen, which is really nice, or feed or whatever, so that the horses, and I can pick that bucket up and I can take it with me. And then when I did go to the hay, I would want to have already observed that the horses would be willing to release the idea to me based on, if I put 4 buckets out, they would wait. And then if I step back, then they could come and take those buckets. And again, not in a dominance, but just in a reverence, that they feel my frequency, feel safe within it, are willing to respond if I ask them to let the thought go. And trying to be very, I think people can sometimes get too aggressive, and you actually create an aggressive conversation by getting too big and creating too much kind of like about it. So anytime I'm engaging space, I'm trying to be as quiet and strong as possible. It's like a clear confidence that I'm engaging in my space, and I want them to feel the certainty in me, but not the bigness of it. You see, I think that's a little bit where when we're talking about space, I think it's an important detail, because I think that's where people can actually create a confrontational frequency. And then slowly it's piles of hay in the pen. So I'll put a couple piles out, and then what I'll do is I'll use one initially, and I want the whole herd to get to a place where they're willing to wait calmly. And then what I do is I'll take a step, and then I start to let them have the hay. And then as they come in, they want to start talking. And again, then I'll just take the hay back gently, just take that space back. And based on my confidence, and I'm saying this for each of people, anyone who's listening, to start engaging this, if you can't get it with one horse at a time, then do not try to do 2. Okay. If you can't get to a place where you can confidently manage this with one horse, doing 2 is only going to overwhelm you. So get this with one horse at a time if you have to, and then slowly with 2, and then with 3. And what I found is by the time I could get the round pen, the interactions in the round pen or in the bigger pen, the thing about a pen size is that you have to not be overfaced by the size of the pen because of the athleticism of your horse. So if the horses are, can run down to the other end of the arena and be interacting for 15 seconds before you could make your way down there to help, then that pen's too big for you. So it needs to be, that's where I like the size of a round pen, because I can use angles to not necessarily have to be as fast or as powerful, but I can still get involved. And then, slowly getting to a place where they would willingly eat. And then I'll start making piles, because the more piles I have, the less I can control each of the things, but it also spreads out the conversations.
Yep.
And then I want to get to a place where I can step back, and now I want them to start talking, because I'm trying to train a form of conversation. Okay. It's like, I don't want to hold from my kids the struggles of life. I want to be there to mentor them through stuff. So this has been a thing for my wife and I. It's like, we try not to shelter tremendously, because I actually want them to struggle. I want them to get into spots where life isn't super easy, so that I can mentor them while they're still under my roof. So then, now that I've set the tone, but I also have to empower them to have some sense of how to process it. So then now we would say that we have empowered them, and now we're stepping back and we're letting the situation start to present itself, but I'm still able to be involved. And generally by this stage, they actually prefer my energy. They like it, because now everybody feels secure and safe. They feel inside of that. So they don't have to puff up and get after it to kind of find their security, because they've already been informed of that flow. So that would be, if I were to mark this out as, if you could do it in its best form, that's what it would look like. That's kind of what I would do. And now what I encourage to people all the time is just to take that, because everybody's scenario and situation is always different. It's like, well, I don't have access to that, or I can't do that. Is to find the best way that you possibly can to individualize, create connection and space with each horse, and then put them together, put one on halter, and then slowly break that down and take as much time as you need. I far more encourage taking a little extra time in separation than rushing it, getting yourself in trouble, getting yourself hurt, getting horses hurt. So generally, in all of these scenarios we live in, it's not as hard to separate them as it is to put them together. Most of the time, putting them together means they're in these tiny, smaller pens, which means the work needs to be done to a more refined level. The more confined the pen is, the longer you should take to get the work, because they can't clear each other's space. They can't clear out. So if there is going to be talking, they have to be able to clear out of each other's spatial primal senses, if that makes sense. Yeah. Cool. Well, that's kind of the general sense of the concept. What do you think?
I think it's amazing. And I also think that, boy, have we been doing it not like that, I think a lot of people, what I've come up against and honestly been guilty of is just, well, turn them out, they'll figure it out. Right. It has been the kind of the main thing. And thankfully for me, for the most part, it's been okay, because Diva, my mare, is just so good in a herd. Like she's just so smart. Right. And I just lucked out that way, I think, where she just knows, and I trust her completely to be safe and to take care of herself. But I have had instances where, I had one little mare and she just, and this is one question I guess I have for you, because I'm sure it's something that other people have run up against as well, is when you get that horse that has not been socialized to be with other horses, that does not have the neuroplasticity laid down that says, this is a safe thing, I know what to do. I have resources I can draw on for this. And that's when I notice, wow, things can go sideways so fast. I do wonder about, those kind, that's when I've run into some big trouble is that kind of horse. And I wonder about that with you, if you've run across those types of horses, and I don't want to put them in a category, or it's more general, but I think that sense, typically for me it's been mares, but that's just such a generalization. But that's just what showed up for me. But what I've seen is they go classically straight to like literally come out the gate double barreling, like they are pulling punches because they don't know what to do. And I just wonder, your
Beautiful.
experience with a horse like that, or horses like that, what you've learned, and how you work to build the resources for or if you can, right?
Yeah. Oh, so good. Love it. Yes, there is. Oftentimes these are mares that can get so aggressive and strong, it appears. But what I have come to understand is these wonderful mares so desire to be heard. They do not feel heard in their life. Sometimes they haven't had social opportunities, and generally there would have been miscommunications with and around them, where they would be being what I would say oppressed. What I mean is that their opinions come up and it's being confronted. So they're being squashed in. And these girls are generally saying, I need to be heard. I want to be heard. I want someone to hear me. And this is a little bit like dysfunctional relationships. What will happen is these relationships will strike out in the places they feel the most safe, as crazy as that seems. The places where we got to put on our defensiveness and get all guarded, we clam all up, we get protected, then we start feeling safe, and then we start showing, it kind of starts coming out. So once they get in the herd, they feel they can start presenting it more and start talking it out, but it happens in such a messy way. And we all know this when we're going through our healing, is like healing is pretty ugly, because you gotta get raw with yourself, and you got to be able to really look at that stuff and talk about it. And so then these horses start showing that, and it can be a challenge. So the first thing, okay, we'll talk about mares and geldings and we'll just separate that conversation first. But generally, what needs to happen is that there has to be an open, energetic intention that says, I hear you, I hear you, I hear you, I hear your desire to be heard, and I'm going to do everything in my power to hear you. And I will actually make that statement with them. As silly as that seems, I will stand there with them. Generally, it's we're in the round pen. It's literally one of the first times they've ever hooked onto me, and they come in, and a lot of times what it ends up with my forehead on their forehead. Like they come down and I just get there with them. Sometimes it's just my hands on them, and with everything in my heart, my senses go to, I hear you, and I'm going to do everything in my power to help you feel safe. Okay. And so then what happens is all of a sudden now, if you just think of how that is between, say, you and I, or people, when you get that feeling from someone, oh my goodness, the level of change in our energy just starts to change, until I can get to a place where I'm not seeing the defensiveness in them. Generally, those horses will also be ear pinners, and they're going to be kicking out, and it comes up so fast that they feel like they need to guard themselves. So it will take me a little bit longer to think about integrating them. They're not going to go right away. Or what I would do is I would find a horse that would match that really well, so that there isn't this kind of, my Max horse, he's like the great moderator, because he just walks into any pen and you just hardly ever see, the only thing you see is play. Max will end up playing, they'll play, but you hardly ever see a kick mark or anything. So I would often use him in those scenarios because he just won't argue. He just does what he does, and it's so great. So if you can find a horse that'll balance that way, then great. But if they are one of those ones that just thinks they need to really reinforce themselves, then it is a matter of taking a little bit more time. So I want them to feel heard. I want them to, I want to open myself to them. I really want them to feel me. So the level of authenticity in my energy and my work has to match. And my ability to refine the way they feel pressured becomes even more crucial as well. So if they feel that I apply pressure and it's done action-based or emotionally stimulated, it fires up their defensiveness. It fires up their defensiveness dramatically. So to the best of my ability, I want to make sure that I'm honoring a relational approach with them. I want them to feel the frequency that I'm giving off, and I want to see the beauty of the relationship develop. And what happens with those mares generally is it's transformative. They begin to release. They love that they can be heard. They don't have to reinforce themselves because they sense that their essence is not needing to reinforce or protect itself. And that becomes the way that those girls end up going into the herd. And a lot of times once they go into the herd with that, it actually isn't very loud. It's not very noisy, because the only reason they were doing it is because they felt like they had to guard themselves or strike out to be heard. But now that piece is met. That's the need for them. And a lot of times you'll run up against, so when you run up against geldings, some of the things you see is, geldings that were maybe cut late, that were, still have that real primal stallion drive, and you see them kind of, really bite into that. It's not much different, but you have to honor the masculinity of their belief. And I think that's the thing for them, is that there's this sense that you have to honor that. So when you get stallions like this, I want them to become knights. I want to, in their training, I want to honor, because every energy has to move. This is the problem in my mind with the dominance-based approach. Energy can't be created or destroyed. Einstein made that very clear to us a long time ago. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. And if there's energy that desires to move, we have to do everything in our power to allow it to move in a beautiful way, instead of in a way we don't like. Because a lot of times we think linear about this. It's like the energy is moving this way, so if I don't like it, I have to stop it. And if I do like it, I let it go. But it's very linear. Well, I think very three-dimensional about energy. It's like it's flowing this way. Well, how about if I just shifted it and it started flowing this way? And then I shifted it here and it started flowing. It's very organic. So then I want to shift it into a beautiful manner. So horses that are like that, they need in their training to have purpose and feel revered. The masculine element generally desires to feel a deep sense of purpose and respect. And there's many things to the masculine side, and then the feminine side for so much of these mares, they want to be heard and they want to feel your affection, and so these are just interesting elements that I have found as consistencies. And again, I don't have any attachment to it. I just begin playing with the feelings until I find frequency and resonance. That's kind of how it works for me. It's not really like, here's what it is for the mare and here's what it is for the gelding. But as you kind of start meeting those needs, again, the herd dynamics change. So sometimes in these scenarios where you have these fringy type horses that are a little bit more extreme in certain areas, it takes a little bit more time to meet their individual need. And a lot of times this is our responsibility because it was the human who tainted it. So that is where the heart comes for us. It is not acceptable for us to become emotionally bothered by what the horse's action is, because if they had not been influenced by us, then it probably wouldn't be that way. Maybe it would be on some level, but they would have enough room to take care of it if it was their natural elements. So then it is only then for us to be patient and kind and calm in how we help. And by operating in those frequencies, and those are all different guitar strings, patience is a funny word because I believe patience to be a word of ego. Kindness is a true, pure word because that is a way of being. Love is a pure word. Patience is generally an egotistical perspective on my betterness, and then kind of like, you know what I mean? Like, I will be patient with your process, versus holding space with loving desire, to just be present and be there. Anyways, that's a little bit of a tangent, but the more we are able to just help them and hold space for them in a way where they can be heard, and then guide that energy in a beautiful way. So with those horses, long story short, with those horses, you need to see that corner turn before you would try to interact or integrate. And then I would begin the process of the integration the way I started in the beginning. But I would keep them separate or find some kind of funny balance for them. Some of those horses, like a donkey or a goat, works for some weird reason because they want companionship, but they can't actually associate in their regular dynamic. So it has to be something different. And, in the ranching world, we've actually had some of those horses, they had to just go in with a cow or with some steers. And they liked them because they had the energy and they had the confidence of the space, but they didn't have to worry about the herd dynamic because the cows just did their own thing. So anyways, I don't know if that answers your question regarding, those unique ones.
Yeah, but that was super helpful. And I've seen that as well with the change in the, like having a different type of animal, like one of those little mares. Her favorite was like the dogs. Like she would play with the, she loved having the dogs around a bunch, and she's so happy living on her own. She lives like no horse around for miles, and she's a content girl. So, so super interesting. And I had one last question before we finish up, Josh, because it's more of a personal curiosity, I would say.
Sure.
Is that my mares have started to change their herd dynamic because Diva's now turning 23. And she just doesn't have the energy anymore to kind of, Raven's a big girl, lots of, tends to have just lots of juice and lots of energy. And so there's been this herd dynamic change where Raven's now quite excited to be the one sort of pushing around and, getting the food that she wants and all the things. So would you suggest going back to the drawing board with them now, 100%. Going back to the round pen, working these pieces? Yeah. Like just taking it right back to square one. Hey,
you betcha. And get involved in the interaction a little more, yeah. And if you are involved, for a lot of people that, in our world right now, the horses have free feed when it's this temperature, but in a lot of situations it's not free feed. It's they're getting fed at different times, so there's high interaction points where it's like there's these climactic moments of excitement. I would go through the process, and then I would start calculating those interaction points, and I would start assisting them. Sometimes it's distance of feed. Sometimes if you have the hay piles at 20 feet spacings, it doesn't work. It needs to be 30. And all this takes is observation. Just watch. And if you put your scientist hat on for a moment, we can just be, okay, I'm going to test that today. I'm going to try 10 feet. And sometimes it's like, nope, they want to eat together. Okay, then that's fine. And sometimes it's like, nope, that's still not a settled energy. So then you make it a little farther and you start figuring out those things that just bring peace in the process of doing the work. Now, if there's a lot of trouble, then I just split them up for a while. And then I would start going through the individual processes. Absolutely. And for some people, we'd say, okay, well, I have an individual element going pretty well with this horse. Then start with the horse on the halter, and one horse on the halter and one horse free, until you can work them together. But absolutely, it is such a gift that we can give them, that we can cognitively calculate a frequency of relational health. Horses don't necessarily, it's not the way their brain works. They'll live in it, they'll emanate it, but they can't necessarily calculate it in these types of moments because their reptilian brain kicks in. So that's really the whole element of just, yes, break it down. Do your best to kind of measure where they're at in that process and then start bringing them back together. You bet. And then be involved at the climax points. Supplements, hay, transition times, where you're involved a little bit more and you're energetically giving a guide, until you start to observe that when you come with the thing, you can feel your frequency because they're actually starting to enjoy the comfort that it brings. And this is what I've noticed. The horses actually would prefer that type of energy. They just can't actually come up with it on their own. Generally, they wouldn't come up with it that way because it's just not the way their brains work. Yeah.
That's super helpful. Thank you. I really appreciate that, because I've seen this change in her dynamic going, okay, what do I want to work with here? So that's really, really great. Thank you. And I know that there's probably many of our listeners having lots of ahas right now. So I'm so grateful for you coming on and having this conversation with me, Josh, because I think it's so important. And I think, we've all been potentially under some misconceptions here that have created, maybe unsafe scenarios and places where we've felt, we've gotten really nervous and anxious, so this is so nice to know that there's other opportunities, other ways of doing it that actually create not only like a greater sense of safety for our horses, but for us as well. So, that's really, that feels really good to me. So thank you so much for doing that.
You're welcome. And I just one other thing that just kind of struck me as you were talking regarding your one mare is getting a little older now, and you're noticing the transition with age. And this is actually a thing. It happens with horses. It happens with dogs because of the age piece, where one doesn't necessarily energetically have the ability to retain that same presence because they don't feel as strong and confident. So it's actually a really important time to be able to step in and assist the transition, to assist the energetic transition. Now, you and I have spoken thoroughly about the transition that animals can go through death, that the herd can go through. That was a big piece that we were able to share together. And this is not that intense, but it is the same, because it's a really important transition when one horse no longer feels like they can kind of carry the same mantle, and then the other horse might not feel comfortable to do so. So then insecurities show up, and you can just see this challenge. But so then if you can step in those moments, and you can read that, you can kind of feel that that's the reason, you can help create peaceful transition into one horse building up their confidence and another horse being able to, it's okay to relinquish that mantle, so to speak. And it can be done in a real beautiful way so that everyone's taken care of. So anyways, I just wanted to kind of, because I just didn't prioritize that point, and then it just came to me. So I just wanted to make sure I touched that before we finished.
That's super helpful. Yeah. And I see that right now. And I think that that's so key, because you don't want that older horse, losing that dignity, losing that sense of strength. Right. And, cause I think, I see it in Diva where there's this little bit of, I can feel it. Like there's just this little niggle for her of like, like this isn't where I wanted to be. This isn't the energy I wanted to have going on right now. I see that in Raven as well, that little bit of insecurity too, not really knowing what to do with this newfound thing that's happening. So that's really appreciated. Thanks, Josh. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yay. Well, I always love having you on, always. And this has been no exception. So thank you for being here.
Oh, you're so welcome. And thank you again for having me. I feel like our conversations have gotten easier and easier. It feels like we've actually been through quite a bit together.
We sure have. I love it. More to come. That's for sure.
Yeah, awesome.
So yeah,
cool.
That's so great. And thanks everyone out there for listening in. So if you want to get in touch with Josh, how do they find you, Josh?
We have our website, joshnichol.com. And I always encourage people to YouTube first. Our YouTube channel, it just has lots of free content. And I always want people to go there first and check that out. We're trying to build that channel so that people can get a really strong sense of my work. You can find us on Facebook too. I do my best to create a group there of safety and space people can grow and learn in a safe environment. And then we also have my membership site where I've just laid out many of my thoughts and lots of teaching and lecturing, and then also ways to go about the work that you can try yourself. And we've also incorporated into the website getting help if you need it. So that's been a key piece to online learning that we're trying to stay in touch with, is to have the help if you are unable to activate the learning on your own, that you can access someone online from anywhere in the world, which is something we're trying to prioritize. The goal is to help people succeed, and we just continue to adapt to help that happen with more refinement.
Wonderful. Amazing. Reach out. Josh is amazing. If you want some support with your horses. And thanks everyone for listening in today. And I'll see you next time. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.